The question, what is programming, has a seemingly obvious answer, and that is writing code that tells the computer to do something. If that is your definition of programming, you are not incorrect, but I, as well as other programmers, would define programming differently. It's more of a process, and writing code is only just part of that process. There are many different approaches to programming, and there's really no one superior way, although Ruby developers would tell you otherwise. There's one approach, however, that has stood the test of time, and it's not that it's the best approach, but it's the approach that works all of the time regardless of what your problem is. And that has three things: planning, writing your code, and then testing. Very rarely do we just sit down and start writing our code. Now, I've done that, and pretty much every other programmer has done that as well. But the problem there is we typically end up rewriting the code that we originally wrote. And that's because we didn't properly plan how we were going to attack a particular problem. Now, when I say problem, I'm not referring to some little math problem. I'm referring to the problem that you are writing software to solve. Because after all, that's why we write software. We have a particular problem that we can solve with software. That problem could be creating a document, or it could be automating something within the system that would normally take a long time to do manually. Well, let's look at a word processor, for example. The word processor solves the problem of creating documents, because before the word processor, documents were created by either handwriting them, by using a typewriter, or by using a printing press. Well, there's some very real problems with those three approaches, but a word processor makes creating documents extremely easy. Not only can you just type text into them, but there's many other features. You can have a spell checker or a thesaurus. You can change the color of text. You can bold it, italicize it. You can insert images. You can do things that would have been impossible to do with older technology. But if you think about all of these features, every one of these features had to be planned beforehand, before the code was written. There are times when we are writing code that we think, aha, this would be a really cool thing to add, and then we add that into our code. But we also have to plan how we are going to do that. So planning is extremely important because it gives us a guide as to how we are going to approach our problem so that we don't have to go back and redo a lot of the work that we've already done. After we've written our code, we want to test it because, unfortunately, we are not perfect. Now, I'm sure that there are some programmers out there that can write perfect code the majority of the time. I'm not one of them. Chances are you aren't either. So after you write code, you typically want to make sure that your code works. And that is what the testing phase is, making sure that your code works. Because after all, if your code doesn't work for you, it's not going to work for your users. And what's the point of writing software to begin with if it's not going to be used by our users? In this course, I'm going to emphasize the coding aspect of the process of programming. The reason being because it's kind of hard to program without being able to write code. So we will spend a lot of time writing code and looking at coding concepts. These will be concepts that you can apply to any other programming language. The syntax is going to be different based upon the language that you use, but the concepts are going to be the same. We will plan some of our code, and we will obviously test our code because we want to see our code work. So with that philosophical stuff out of the way, we will go on to the next lesson where we will choose the language that we are going to use.